Eleanor hit the concrete. Hard. Her granddaughter Paige didn't flinch. From 3 rows up, Paige muttered into her phone, "I told Grandma not to be dramatic." No one from her own son's family came to help. Not Paige, not her daughter-in-law. That night, Eleanor opened the binder that had funded 4 years of silence. By morning, the rent, tuition, car insurance, all gone. Every dollar reclaimed. This wasn't revenge. It was a grandmother unraising the family that forgot her. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The sun was too sharp that morning, glinting off every metal bleacher, spotlighting imperfections. Eleanor squinted, one hand pressed over her brow like a visor, the other gripping the steel railing as she made her way down the uneven stadium steps. She never should have worn the heels, but they were Paige's favorite. Burgundy leather pumps Eleanor had polished the night before, paired with a cream blouse and brooch that once belonged to her own mother. If there was ever a day to look dignified, it was the day her only granddaughter graduated college, row F, seat 14. That's where her daughter-in-law said they'd be. 3 steps shy of the row, Eleanor's heel caught a crack in the concrete. Her hand slipped. A pivot, a stumble, and then the silence that only follows a public fall. One breath, then the sound of skin meeting stadium, unforgiving and sharp. A gasp rippled through the crowd, then whispers, then nothing. Someone called, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Another offered a water bottle. A volunteer in a purple lanyard knelt beside her. Eleanor pushed herself up before anyone could touch her. "I'm fine," she said, her voice smooth, rehearsed. "I just lost my footing." Her wrist stung. Her knees would bruise, but she stood straight, brushing off the flecks of gravel from her slacks with the quiet defiance only 7 decades of self-composure could buy. They resumed the ceremony as if nothing had cracked. Later, in the parking lot, she heard it. Paige was on the phone, standing by her friend's SUV, still in cap and gown, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "It was so embarrassing," Paige said, exhaling like the fall had knocked the wind out of her. "I told her not to wear heels, I told her. But no, she had to do her whole dramatic flair thing." Laughter through the speaker. "Whatever," Paige added, "at least nobody got it on video." The comment didn't cut Eleanor. It hollowed her, not because Paige was cruel, but because she was casual, clipped, dismissive, like Eleanor was an inconvenience, a misstep in more ways than one. No one offered her an arm walking back to the car. No one asked if her wrist still ached. She sat in the back seat quietly, listening to Paige and her parents discuss where to go for celebratory mimosas. They didn't ask her to join. She didn't ask to be included. That night, Eleanor changed into her soft robe and sat down at the desk in her guest room, the one she'd converted into an office after her husband passed. The air smelled faintly of lavender lotion and old books. Her body hurt, but her mind was awake in a way it hadn't been in months. She pulled out her worn blue binder, her financial binder. Every major decision she'd made in the last 15 years lived inside. Page dividers were labeled with sticky notes and neat handwriting. The first tab read, "Education Fund Page." She turned to it slowly. There, in rows of neat entries, were every check, every transfer, every line item that had paved the way for Page's tassel turn today. Tuition payments to the university, housing deposits, book reimbursements, meal stipends during summer internships. One note even read, "Emergency Wisdom Teeth Fund, don't tell her I covered it." She traced the ink of one memo. For Page's future. "Love always, Grandma." Eleanor sat with that page for a long time. Then, with a firm hand, she flipped to the next tab. This one read, "Recurring, rent, car, tuition, books, meals." The numbers didn't lie. Neither did the silence. The next morning, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table with a mug of black tea and her reading glasses sliding down the bridge of her nose. The binder still lay open from the night before, but this time she brought her calculator. She turned to the page marked, "Recurring." Each month, $1,300 for Paige's off-campus apartment, $140 for her car insurance, $75 to a university bookstore card Eleanor had quietly reloaded during finals week, 19 months of rent. Eleanor pressed the button slowly, each beep echoing louder than it should. 1,300 times 19 equals $24,700. And that didn't include the just this once Uber payments, surprise textbook rush orders, or the time Eleanor paid for Paige's root canal when insurance lapsed. She never asked for repayment. She didn't even ask for thanks. But now, in the stillness of her home, she realized she had stopped asking to be seen. The sting deepened with memory. It was the first year of COVID, everything uncertain and breathless. Paige had called crying about online classes and the school's sudden move-out policy. Eleanor had offered to help, quietly covered the deposit for her temporary apartment, then covered rent again and again. One day, Paige's laptop crashed mid-exam week. Eleanor overnighted her a new one, sleek, silver, lightweight. Paige's only response? "Ugh, I wanted the rose gold one." Eleanor had smiled. Even then, she told herself it was nerves, youth, stress. But now, with the silence of graduation still in her bones, she no longer wanted to be the cushion to someone else's carelessness. She opened her laptop and started a fresh spreadsheet. The title? Total Unreturned Gratitude. She worked line by line, date, amount, category, description. It was methodical, therapeutic, like unpacking a storage unit full of boxes she never meant to keep. As the numbers grew, so did a strange relief. These transactions had once been gestures of love, but love unacknowledged, she realized, begins to feel like debt. A notification popped up on her screen. Instagram? Paige tagged you in a post. Eleanor clicked. Photos from the ceremony. Paige in her cap and gown, arm linked with friends, all of them mid-laugh. The caption, "Couldn't have done it without my girls drawn her grad life, Jama, no more papers." No mention of Eleanor. No tag in the second photo, where Eleanor stood in the background, hands clasped in front of her, a faint bruise already blooming along her wrist. Later that evening, Eleanor sat by the window as dusk folded in. A quiet breeze brushed against her skin. The air smelled of distant lilacs and spent days. Her phone buzzed. "Paige, can I get $40 for post-grad brunch with the girls? I forgot I tipped too much last night, lol. Thanks, XOXO. Eleanor didn't reply. Not yet. She reached instead for the binder, turned the page, took out a pen, and wrote something new. Eleanor sat at her desk with the blinds drawn and a cup of rooibos cooling beside her mousepad. Her desktop glowed with the banking portal's login screen, the cursor blinking like a silent dare. She clicked in. The site loaded slowly, the way important moments often do, not rushed, but heavy with implication. Recurring transfers. Paige L. Saunders. There it was. A tidy row of transactions stacked like dominoes. Rent, tuition, books, insurance, each labeled as monthly, each drawn from the account she'd set up 6 years ago, back when Paige was just a freshman afraid of community showers and late-night campus sirens. Now she was a graduate, and the person Eleanor once rescued from that first tearful phone call was gone, replaced by someone who treated her like a burden instead of a blessing. She took a breath, then moved the cursor. Rent, $1,300. Cancel. Confirm. Car insurance, $140. Remove payment method. Confirm. Textbook credit, $75. Deactivate account. Confirm. Each confirmation pinged like a final note in a symphony she no longer had the heart to conduct. Only one remained, a payment scheduled for May 31st. She opened the memo field, typed final gift. She left that one in place. Not because Paige deserved it, but because Eleanor believed in exits with clarity, not confusion. She opened a new browser tab, composed a fresh email, subject, budget changes, to paige.saunders@email.com. Dear Paige, congratulations again on your graduation. As you step into this next chapter, I trust you'll handle your responsibilities with the same independence your degree reflects. Effective immediately, I've transitioned financial responsibilities back to you. The May payment will be your last scheduled support from me. With calm pride, Grandma Eleanor. She read it twice. No heat, no apology, just the truth, dressed in clean grammar and intentional punctuation. She clicked send, then paused, opened her contacts, scrolled to financial autopay, page, delete contact, confirm. She closed her laptop with quiet ceremony, the kind you reserve for the end of a long book, one where the ending doesn't quite redeem the beginning but still brings closure. That evening, she made herself a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup, the same meal she used to make Paige when she visited as a little girl, and declared Eleanor's house her weekend castle. The air smelled of butter and nostalgia, but Eleanor didn't flinch. Instead, she sat in the quiet, spooned the soup slowly, and savored something rare. Relief. Her phone buzzed on the table. Paige. Wait, what? What happened? No greeting, no warmth, just confusion disguised as entitlement. Eleanor read the message. Let it sit. She tapped the edge of the bowl twice with her spoon, then wiped her hands, stood up, and walked to the piano room. It was time to let silence speak for her. The message from Paige sat unread for 2 days. Eleanor didn't open it. She didn't have to. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, tea cooling in her hand. Hyle the dishwasher hummed behind her like a distant applause for something long overdue. The silence wasn't heavy, it was earned. Still, it echoed. She thought of her mother, a woman who raised 3 children with no savings, no spouse, and certainly no safety net. No one celebrated her. She didn't expect it. Gratitude wasn't something her generation demanded, it was what they gave. Eleanor had broken that cycle, or thought she had. She scrolled through her voicemail with slow fingers, expecting something, anything, that felt like recognition. Instead, just one message blinked back. She pressed play. Hey, Paige's mother began with the kind of tone that always made Eleanor feel like a babysitter instead of a matriarch. Paige said you canceled a few things. She's really confused, not mad or anything, just surprised. Anyway, maybe give her a call. She's a little emotional. No question about Eleanor's health, no mention of the fall, no thanks for years of silent support, just confusion that the money had stopped. Eleanor stared out the window. The garden looked like it hadn't missed her at all, sunlight laying evenly across every bloom. Maybe gratitude was like that, beautiful only when freely given, otherwise just a shadow pretending to be warmth. She pushed away from the table and walked to her music room. The space had gone unused for months, the air inside thick with dust and old memory. She wiped her hand along the top of the piano, then sat down. Her fingers hovered over the keys before pressing out a slow, aching melody, something minor and familiar, her own version of grace. As she played, her eyes caught the edge of an old drawer beneath the sideboard. She opened it out of habit. Inside was a faded envelope decorated in neon marker. Grandma equals magic, it read, scrawled in Paige's middle school handwriting. A small star sat crooked over the eye. Eleanor ran her hand over it like Braille. She didn't cry. She framed it in a small brass frame, set it on the bookshelf in the music room, and scribbled a post-it note that she stuck discreetly to the back, before the switch flipped. That night, she opened her laptop and pulled up her estate documents. The trust list still showed Paige's name under 2 major allocations, educational reimbursement and unrestricted support. Eleanor's lips pressed into a line. She opened a blank email. 2. Alan Reeves, attorney subject, trust revision request. Hi Alan, please begin the process of removing Paige L. Saunders as an active beneficiary of the family trust, effective June 1st. I'll follow up with adjusted allocations for distribution by month end. Best, Eleanor. She hit send before she could hesitate. Then she opened her filing cabinet. The red folder marked Paige, Education and Living Support sat between Medical and Legacy. Eleanor pulled it out, crossed through the old label with a thick black Sharpie and wrote, Closed, June 1st. She replaced it in the cabinet, spine out like any other chapter she was no longer reading. Paige hadn't thanked her when the rent got paid or when the books were covered. She hadn't even mentioned Eleanor in the graduation photo captions, and now that the support had stopped, the panic sounded louder than the silence that came before it, because gratitude doesn't echo when it was never spoken aloud in the first place. The next morning, Eleanor's inbox dinged with a reply from Alan Reeves, subject Trust Notification Protocol, Eleanor. To proceed, we'll need to send formal notification to Paige. Any former beneficiary removed from disbursements must be informed in writing. Let me know how you'd like to handle delivery. Alan. The envelope was cream-colored with Eleanor's lawyer's letterhead pressed into the top corner like a signature that didn't need a name. It arrived at Paige's apartment 3 days after the trust revision was filed. Inside, a formal notice of change to an irrevocable family trust. The language was clinical, factual, final. You were previously designated as a named beneficiary under the Eleanor R. Collins Family Trust. As of June 1, 2020, you have been removed from all active disbursements. No further action is required on your part. No sentiment, no explanation, just a door closing in slow motion. The call came that evening. Eleanor had just finished her walk and was placing her garden gloves on the porch rail when the phone lit up. Paige. Mobile. She let it ring once, twice, then picked up. There was no hello, just sobbing. Grandma, I just got this letter. Are you serious? Eleanor stayed quiet, letting the storm pass before it began. Paige's voice cracked. You cut me out of your will? I didn't even know I was in it. I didn't mean what I said at graduation. I was just stressed. Eleanor spoke slowly, each word weighed and chosen. Stress doesn't invent feelings, Paige. It reveals them. There was a long pause, then Paige's tone sharpened. So this is punishment. You're being vindictive. Eleanor stared out at her roses, the light catching on the thorns. No, she said simply. I'm being factual. Paige hung up. No apology, just silence on her end and wind on Eleanor's. She stood still for a long time after the call, hands clasped like a prayer she no longer needed to say. Later that night, Eleanor opened her laptop. She navigated to the graduation video that the college had posted, one of those sweeping, wide-angle highlight reels meant to make everyone feel like they mattered. She found the timestamp, 1:46:3, the moment her heel caught on the uneven concrete. The crowd clapped for a graduate off-screen, then the gasp, then the pause, a few people turning their heads, staff starting to move, and there she was, falling alone. She slowed the clip, watched her body crumple in real time, watched no one from her family rush forward. She paused the video as she lay on the ground. She took a screenshot, then opened a folder on her desktop titled Reality Archive. She saved the image with a new label, Final Wake Up. The next morning she received a voicemail from Paige's mother, this one less vague. I don't want to interfere, Eleanor, but Paige is really struggling. She's not eating. She says she's being erased. I don't know what to say to her. Maybe you could soften this somehow? Eleanor listened with the same neutrality she had once taught her music students when they hit the wrong key. No anger, just acknowledgement. She didn't press delete. She didn't reply. Instead, she walked to her piano, played a warm progression in C major, 3 chords, no lyrics. Then she stood, went to the kitchen, and brewed chamomile tea. By noon, she received a second email from her attorney. Subject: confirming notification delivered Eleanor. Formal delivery was confirmed via certified mail. If Paige contacts you, you are not obligated to engage. Let me know if you'd like to finalize the reallocation recommendations by end of week. Alan, she replied, let's finalize. No further discussion needed. Best, Eleanor outside, the breeze picked up. The sky was clear. The kind of day meant for recovery, not remorse. She took her tea to the back garden and sat down in the sun. Eleanor had once paid for Paige's first plane ticket to college, her winter coat, even a last-minute book shipment that had cost more to overnight than the textbook itself. And she hadn't asked for repayment, just respect. But even that had been too expensive, apparently. The call came during Eleanor's second cup of tea, her phone lighting up just as steam curled from the spout of her kettle. Her sister's name flashed on the screen. Janice, mobile. Eleanor let it ring once before answering. "You really cut Paige out of the trust?" Janice asked. "No pleasantries, no preamble?" Eleanor stirred honey into her mug. "I adjusted it," she said flatly. "She's devastated," Janice said. "Her mom says she's crying herself sick. Look, I know she said the wrong thing, but kids say dumb things. You of all people know that." "She's not a kid," Eleanor replied. "She's a 22-year-old adult who weaponized embarrassment because I happened to fall near her spotlight." Silence. Then, "Is this really worth the fallout?" Eleanor took a long sip, letting the heat burn into her answer. "This isn't punishment, it's conclusion." Later that night, Paige texted again. The screen lit up in Eleanor's darkened hallway like an echo. "Paige, I'm not like that. You just misunderstood me. No apology, no acknowledgement, just deflection." Eleanor read it twice, then did what she always did when clarity felt too murky for conversation. She turned to the page. She opened her filing drawer and pulled out her printed text records, meticulously backed up each month like evidence. She flipped through pages, highlighter in hand. Every message from Paige for the last year, every single one. "Can you Venmo for Uber? Do you still have my FAFSA login? Laptop charger broke? Can you order another? Need help with groceries? Please send $75. Every message was a request, not one said thank you. She circled them all, one after the other, then opened a fresh journal. On the first line, she wrote, "First day of not being useful equals first day of being seen." She paused, pen resting on the page, then underlined it. Twice. The next morning, she walked into the community college with her hair combed back and a navy cardigan buttoned to her collarbone. She passed bulletin boards crammed with flyers for pottery, photography, tax help. Then she saw it. Stories We Lived, memoir writing for women 60+. She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't rise to the lips, just warms behind the ribs. In the classroom, 12 chairs were arranged in a circle. No desks, just folding chairs and notebooks and pens. The instructor, a silver-haired woman with paint on her sneakers, welcomed everyone with the words, "We've all been erased somewhere. This is your pen." Eleanor sat down and wrote her name on the first page, Eleanor R. Collins, and underneath it, a title, "The Cost of Silence, A Grandmother's Math." By week's end, she'd created a new folder at home, both digital and physical, label, Reallocated Legacy. Inside, she drafted a document redirecting the amount she once spent on Paige each month. $1,300 for rent, $140 for insurance, $75 for miscellaneous. That money would now fund something different. Support grants for elder women entering writing, music, or education late in life. A fund not built on bloodlines, but on recognition. She typed a mission statement, not inheritance. Reclamation. In her third class, during a group discussion on personal essays, a woman named Cheryl, white curls, deeply lined hands, turned to Eleanor and said softly, "You sound like someone who got erased by family." The sentence landed like a pin in the spine. Eleanor smiled gently. "I did," she said, "but I rewrote the ending." Eleanor left the workshop that evening with her notebook pressed to her chest like a second heartbeat. Cheryl's words, "You sound like someone who got erased by family," still echoed beneath her skin, not as a wound, but as a mirror. It was the first time anyone had named it out loud. She walked home with deliberate steps, her shoes clicking against the pavement like punctuation. Streetlights flickered on one by one, as if spotlighting her return. That night, seated at her kitchen table with the porch light humming behind her, she opened her journal and reread her entry from class. The fall that revealed everything. It wasn't just about Paige. It wasn't just about a bruise on her elbow or the sting of overheard embarrassment. It was about decades of quiet endurance, about being valuable until she wasn't. She took a deep breath and opened her laptop. In the morning, her teacher had written feedback in red ink at the bottom of the page. "Your story is tight, layered, and surprisingly cinematic. Submit this. You must. Eleanor hesitated, then Googled local literary publications accepting nonfiction essays. She found one, the Midlife Register, monthly, small readership, but real. She attached the document, typed a short, formal cover note, and hit send before she could talk herself out of it. She closed her laptop, then made herself tea. No ceremony, no reward, just something warm to hold. 3 weeks later, the email came while she was watering her snake plant in the sunroom. Subject: We loved your piece. Publication date: June 12th. Eleanor's hands didn't tremble, but she sat down on the edge of the armchair and whispered, "Well then." She didn't tell Janice. She didn't tell anyone. The issue came out digitally. She skimmed past the editor's note until she saw her title, The Fall That Revealed Everything, by Eleanor R. Collins. She clicked and read her own words as if they belonged to someone else. They didn't sound bitter or weak. They sounded clear. Within hours, the comment section began to fill. I didn't know anyone else had experienced this. This happened to me, with my son. Thank you. I cried reading this. Eleanor refreshed the page. Again. For every stranger who typed thank you, a decade of silence lifted from her shoulders. At 8:41 that night, her phone buzzed. Page. You wrote about me? Wow. No punctuation, no warmth, no congratulations, just the implied accusation beneath the short text. Eleanor stared at it, then typed back, no names were used, but if you see yourself in it, ask why. She hit send, no regret. She added the message to her new digital folder, Emotional Responses to Publication. And then, for the first time in months, she slept the entire night without waking once. The next day, the piece was shared on a national advocacy group's Facebook page, Elder Voices United. A flood of reposts followed. Caregivers, retired teachers, women in their 60s and 70s and 80s tagging each other. You need to read this. Eleanor muted the notifications, but she saw them all. A week later, she received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail, then played it back. Ms. Collins, I'm the coordinator for the Harmony Bay Women's Retirement Retreat. We read your piece aloud during our story night. It resonated deeply. Would you consider being our featured guest speaker this fall? Eleanor stared out the window where sunlight danced across the neighbors' wind chimes. The voicemail invitation to speak at the Harmony Bay Women's Retreat had sat in her inbox for 5 days. She'd played it 3 times, each word echoing in her living room like someone else's story being told to her by mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. Her words, her fall, her silence, her clarity, had traveled. And now, they were being asked to take the stage. She accepted the invitation. The retreat center sat at the edge of a quiet lake, the kind that shimmered silver at dawn and held heat like memory by dusk. Eleanor arrived early, the scent of pine mixed with old, wood and fresh coffee as she was led to the amphitheater, just a semicircle of weathered benches, a mic, and 200 women waiting. She wore dark blue, no heels, flat shoes with rubber soles and resolve. The coordinator, a woman named Janine with silver curls and an anchor tattoo, handed her a lapel mic and whispered, "Tell it like it is." Eleanor smiled gently. "I always do. They just didn't listen before." She stepped onto the platform with her notes folded once, then again. She didn't use them. Instead, she looked out at the sea of weathered faces, women with lives behind them and longings still ahead, and said, "They clapped when her name was called. They gasped when I hit the floor." There was a beat of silence. Then 100 heads nodded in synchrony, as if they too had fallen in public, had been left to rise alone. She spoke for 17 minutes, about care that becomes conditional, about invisibility that arrives not with age, but with the quiet shift from giver to too much. She ended with, "A fall doesn't make you fragile. It makes you see who runs to lift you. No tears, no tremble." The audience rose as one. A standing ovation, not just for survival, but for saying what so many had swallowed. Backstage, a woman approached her holding a clipboard and a worn leather tote. "I'm Grace," she said. "I run a podcast called Sounding Out the Silence. Would you consider telling your story there? It's for elder advocacy, private stories, public change." Eleanor nodded slowly. "As long as I don't have to name her. I'm not here to shame, just to shift something." Grace smiled. "That's exactly what we need." The episode went live 3 weeks later. Eleanor recorded it in a tiny studio with a ticking wall clock and a velvet chair that smelled faintly of lemon oil. She told her story plainly. No names, no venom, just the truth. By the end of the week, the episode had been shared more than 11,000 times in elder care groups, family law forums, and women's networks. This voice is who I needed 10 years ago. She's speaking the sentence I never could finish. Play this for every daughter who thinks aging equals irrelevance. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Eleanor came home from the post office and found a small box on her doorstep. Inside, a bouquet of hydrangeas and a folded card. "You're still teaching. Thank you for the lessons I missed the first time. Melanie." Class of '98. Eleanor held the stems to her nose and inhaled until her lungs ached. Then she placed the flowers in the same vase that once held Paige's graduation roses. That evening, she sat at her desk, logged into her email, and checked her podcast stats. Not for ego, but to remind herself this had meant something. That's when she opened social media and saw the post. Paige Saunders. Looking for a roommate. Subletting starting next month. DM for details. There was a photo attached. A small living room, dimly lit. And there, in the corner of the frame, was something familiar. A navy blue velvet couch with a tear in the left seam. Eleanor's old couch, the one she'd given Paige as a moving-in gift, the one that had sat in the corner of the apartment she paid for. The apartment Paige now couldn't afford alone. Eleanor stared at the photo for a long moment. Not with malice, not with triumph, just with quiet understanding. Actions echo. And now, one of them was bouncing back. The velvet couch confirmed what Eleanor had already suspected. Paige hadn't just listed the apartment, she'd been pushed out of it. A week later, the voicemail came from the building's landlord. "Hi, Eleanor. I know you're probably not involved anymore, but I wanted to flag that this month's rent hasn't cleared. Paige mentioned you used to... Well, just wanted to check if this is a temporary thing." Eleanor listened with the speakerphone on, slicing apples for a cobbler. The rhythmic sound of blade against wood was calm, unhurried. She pressed callback. "Hi, this is Eleanor Collins. I'm no longer responsible for Paige's financial matters. Please direct future inquiries to her." Click. She wiped her hands on her apron and exhaled through her nose. It wasn't anger, just finality, like a door swinging shut and latching clean. Later that night, she found Paige's latest post online. "Not that it's anyone's business, but family money should come without conditions. I'm not playing these earn-your-worth games. Toxic inheritance culture is real." It had 4 likes and 1 comment. "Girl, same." Eleanor didn't respond. She just closed the app and returned to her desk. Her lawyer's email was waiting. Subject: Trust revision finalized. New recipient update. She opened the document. Paige's name had officially been replaced. New allocation. Collins Reentry Scholarship for adult women. Returning to higher education. After 30+. The funds were no longer frozen in expectation. They were fluid now, moving toward someone who might use them with grace. 2 mornings later, she received the first. Scholarship application. Name: Jasmine Morales. Age: 39. Status: single parent, returning for RN certification. Essay title: I'm not starting over, just starting different. Eleanor read every word twice. The woman had been working night shifts, caring for a disabled mother, raising 2 sons, and now wanted to pursue nursing because care shouldn't be unpaid just because it comes from love. Eleanor pressed her palm to her chest, held it there, then reached for her checkbook. She tore the first check from the book, placed it inside a note card that read, "Let no one mistake your strength for luck. Eleanor Collins." She walked it down to the mailbox herself. The autumn air carried hints of oak and cooling earth. Every step felt lighter than the one before. That evening, she opened her new journal and titled a fresh page, "Things I Fund That Feed Souls." Under it, she wrote, "Jasmine, RN program, full tuition." The silence I kept, traded for the voice I found. Meals made without resentment, boundaries that feel like bricks, not bars. She put the pen down. Just for a moment, her fingers hovered above it like a conductor deciding if the piece was finished. Then she smiled and closed the book. Her phone buzzed, a voicemail, unknown number, but she knew that voice before she even hit play. Paige's mother, her daughter-in-law. "Eleanor, listen, I know things have gotten complicated, but Paige is struggling. This whole thing, it's hit her hard. You've made your point. Can you maybe ease up now?" No apology, just a plea for softening. Eleanor sat very still, phone in hand. The light above her flickered gently, casting long shadows across the kitchen tiles. She let the voicemail finish. Didn't press delete. Didn't press save. Just stared out the window into the yard she'd built, the life she'd reclaimed. The silence she now understood wasn't empty at all. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, the quiet hum of the refrigerator syncing with the flicker of the voicemail light. She hadn't deleted it, hadn't responded. It just sat there, glowing faintly on the edge of the counter. "You've made your point, but she's struggling." The voice hadn't cracked. There was no apology in it, no ownership, just the same threadbare suggestion. Eleanor should smooth it over. Again. She pressed play. "Eleanor, look, this has been hard on her. Paige is not herself lately. She's barely eating. She feels ashamed. You've made your point. Can you maybe ease up now?" Click. No mention of the fall. No, "How are you?" Just Paige's discomfort framed as Eleanor's burden to mend. She listened twice more. The third time, she didn't listen at all. She just heard the silence after the message and the space she'd carved by refusing to be invisible. Then she picked up her pen and wrote one line in her journal. "She didn't struggle when I fell. She struggles now that I stepped back." That same afternoon, Eleanor drove herself to the city library, a tall glass building just renovated with floors of light and air and shelves arranged like architecture. She remembered bringing Paige here once as a child. Paige had said the building smelled like crayons and grown-up paper. She had loved it, or at least she used to. At the information desk, Eleanor handed over a signed check and a short proposal. "I'd like to fund a new initiative," she said, "a storytelling program for women over 60, those who've lived, supported, sacrificed, and been forgotten." The librarian blinked, then smiled with tears forming in the corners of her eyes. "You're not the first to ask for something like this, but you're the first to make it happen." 2 weeks later, she stood in front of a new bronze plaque. It was small but sharp-edged, affixed to the glass door of a third-floor meeting room. Elder Stories Project, dedicated by Eleanor R. Collins, Fall, Then Rise. She snapped a photo, posted it online with a caption she didn't run past anyone. "Support doesn't equal silence. I did both. For years. Now I speak and give with conditions." She didn't tag family, didn't wait for likes. She went home, made tea, set her phone on the windowsill. The post began to trend within a day. No family members reacted, but her neighbor, Sandra, a widow from 2 doors down, showed up with a basket of warm apple muffins wrapped in a cloth that smelled like nutmeg and effort. "You've done something bigger than parenting," Sandra said, settling the basket onto the kitchen counter. "You turned pain into something structured. I admire that." Eleanor didn't cry. She didn't even blink hard. She just nodded and said, "Thank you. I wanted to make something that would outlive misunderstanding." She placed the muffins in her pantry. Every shelf was full now. Organized, labeled, stocked by her, for her. No quiet erasure. No one forgetting what she'd done and what she'd endured. Just quiet abundance. That evening, as the light dipped and turned the kitchen gold, Eleanor opened her laptop to respond to a volunteer request from the library. Her inbox pinged. Subject: Story Inquiry, Modern Legacy Feature. From Ava Mendez, Senior Writer, The Columnist Journal. Dear Ms. Collins, we're profiling women reshaping what legacy means through action, not assumption. Your name came up again and again. Would you be open to being the focus of our next piece? Title: The Grandmother Who Rewrote the Will. Best, Ava Eleanor stared at the screen. No trembling, no rush, just the quiet gravity of being seen for more than what she gave. She stood, poured a second cup of tea, and let the invitation sit open on the screen. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, then lowered. Eleanor reread the reporter's email twice before replying, not because she doubted her story, but because this time she wanted the telling to be deliberate, not a reaction, but a choice. Her subject line was simple: happy to share. Let's begin. The interview happened on a Wednesday morning. She made coffee and wore the burgundy sweater her late husband once called her teaching armor. It still smelled faintly of cedar and clean laundry. The call lasted an hour. The questions were direct but respectful. How do you define legacy now? What made you draw the line? What would you say to other grandmothers still paying bills in silence? Eleanor answered with calm truth. I don't see what I did as brave. I see it as overdue. The difference between generosity and obligation is the expectation of silence. When the piece went live 5 days later, it was featured on the homepage of Modern Elder under the banner, Funding with Boundaries, the grandmother who rewrote her role. Below it, a photo of Eleanor in her music room, framed by light, seated at her upright piano. The caption read, She fell once, then rose on her own terms. Her inbox exploded. Women from Ohio to Oregon sent notes that began with, Finally, someone said it, or I thought I was the only one. A retired social worker wrote, Your words unlocked a door I didn't know I'd bolted shut. A woman named Vanessa asked if Eleanor could mentor her through a late-in-life nursing program. She had just turned 50, had 2 teenagers, and a dream she'd buried in the 90s. I need someone who understands what it means to give and still grow, Vanessa wrote. Would you? Eleanor didn't hesitate. She replied, Absolutely. Let's begin with why you're returning. Your why should lead your how. She set up a folder on her desktop. Vanessa, Re-Entry Journey. Among the sea of encouragement, one subject line caught her breath. From Paige Saunders. Subject, Was any of it ever real? She clicked it. I saw the article. So I'm the ungrateful granddaughter now? Did any of it mean anything? Or was I just a line item in your reinvention? There was no hello, no apology, just fear wearing sarcasm's mask. Eleanor stared at the blinking cursor in her reply window, then typed, Yes, it was all real, until you mistook it for permanence. She didn't add more. Truth doesn't need a footnote. 3 days later, a woman at the grocery store stopped her near the floral section. You're Eleanor Collins, right? I read your piece, I clipped it, sent it to my sister. You said what we've been too tired or too polite to say. Eleanor nodded. The woman gave her a small bouquet of lavender and baby's breath. Thank you, she said, for reminding us we're not invisible. Eleanor took the bouquet home and placed it in the center of her piano. She whispered, I see you, as if speaking to every woman she'd ever taught, helped, or held. But not all echoes were as fragrant. That weekend, her friend Gwen forwarded a Reddit link with a message, You might want to see this. Page is trending. Eleanor clicked. The thread's title, entitled Grandkids Who Blew Their Inheritance. Top comment, Imagine dragging your grandma at your own graduation and then crying when she cuts you off. Take. There were screenshots, tweets, even a short TikTok summary with audio from Eleanor's podcast. Eleanor didn't comment. She didn't have to. She just closed her laptop and walked into her music room, played Debussy's Clair de Lune with more ease than she had in years. Notes lingered in the air, soft and final. For days, strangers dissected the story of a granddaughter who shamed her grandmother and then watched the inheritance vanish like mist. Comments ranged from harsh to hilarious to heartbreakingly familiar. She burned the bridge and then asked for a toll pass. My grandma would have bought me a house. I bought her silence. This is why you never mistake help for a guarantee. It spread like spilled ink, slow, irreversible. By the end of the week, Paige had turned her Instagram private. Her TikTok bio now read, "Taking a break. Please be kind," but digital regret rarely invited grace. Her friends, once loud in brunch photos and birthday reels, stopped tagging her. A few quietly unfollowed. One even commented, "Not everyone's grandma was this generous. Mine made me pay rent in high school." The echo chamber had turned on her. Eleanor read none of this with joy, only confirmation. She didn't screenshot. She didn't forward the thread to friends. Instead, she closed her laptop and pulled out her leather-bound journal. In her cursive, still steady after decades of staff meetings and music lesson notes, she wrote, "This isn't vengeance, it's balance." She underlined it once, then got up and walked to the living room. Her mantle hadn't changed in years. A row of family photos stood like frozen declarations of loyalty. Paige as a baby in a pink bonnet. Paige in middle school with messy curls and a toothy grin. Paige holding up a graduated sign, cap tilted. Eleanor took a breath and began. She removed them one by one, gentle, deliberate. Not a purge, but a release. Each frame she dusted carefully, then placed into a deep, cedar-lined memory chest beside the piano. She locked it, not out of anger, but to preserve the parts of Paige that still mattered, before the entitlement, before the disappointment. In their place, she added a new photo. Her and the storytelling circle. 9 women, arms linked, eyes bright with the sort of kinship born of scar tissue and second chances, and beside it, a framed picture of her holding the scholarship award letter. The envelope read, "To Eleanor R. Collins, in honor of lives uplifted through clarity." It wasn't glossy or gold-embossed, but it shined with something better, earned impact. Her home didn't look empty now, it looked honest. It reflected not what she'd given, but who had shown up after. She poured a cup of lemon tea and stood by the window as dusk softened the edges of her lawn. Outside, the neighborhood kids raced past on bikes, the same way Paige once did in summers long gone. Streamers on her handlebars, skinned knees, and belly laughs that echoed long after dinner. Eleanor didn't cry. She simply whispered, "Boundaries echo louder than memories." Then the mail slot clinked open. A soft thud on the floor. She walked to the door. There, alone on the tile, was a pale blue envelope. No return address. But the handwriting? Familiar? Curvy. Once childish, now stilted. Paige. Eleanor bent slowly and picked it up. The paper was heavier than it looked. She turned it over in her hand, pressing her thumb against the seal, but not breaking it. Not yet. She stared at it for a long time, heart still, hands steady. The echo had returned, but this time it wasn't digital. It was written, personal, maybe even real. The letter sat unopened on Eleanor's kitchen table for 2 days. Each morning, she'd make her tea, walk past it, and let the envelope's weight linger in the air like unsaid words between strangers. She didn't avoid it, she honored it. She gave it the space its silence had earned. On the 3rd morning, she lit a candle, set her mug down, and slid a letter opener beneath the seal. The paper was thick. The handwriting hesitant, unfamiliar in its vulnerability. She unfolded it, smoothing out the crease like it might bite. "Grandma, you were never embarrassing. I was. I was small and cruel, and so afraid of looking like I came from anything less than perfect, I treated you like a flaw. I've replayed it all. The shoes, the fall, your face. I said you were fine, but I saw the way your hands trembled. I told my friend it was your fault because I couldn't admit it was mine. You gave, and I couldn't even give grace. I'm sorry." There were no justifications, no requests for restoration. Just regret, raw and clean. Eleanor pressed the letter against her chest and closed her eyes. And for the first time in months, she cried, not out of pain, but out of something rarer, recognition, not forgiveness, not yet, but something that sat adjacent to it, like the porch next to a locked door. She didn't text Paige. She didn't write back. But later that evening, she pulled out her legal binder, thumbed through the tab marked estate, and opened the draft of her current will, the one that had neatly excised Paige from every disbursement. She clicked open her laptop, began typing with deliberate fingers. Section 4. A. Beneficiary Clause, Contingent Distribution. Paige L. Saunders may be considered for reinstatement upon demonstrable sustained acts of service or contribution. Legacy is not a given. It is earned. She paused, then added, Note, an apology opens the gate. Walking through it is another matter. Later that night, she added a new folder to her desk drawer. It was black, unlabeled on the outside. Inside, she placed the letter. No scribbles, no underlines, no highlighter. Just as it came. Sincere, still, and folded with intention. She slid it next to her estate paperwork and labeled the folder spine, Reconsidered. That word. Not forgiven, not restored. Just reconsidered. The next morning, she opened her curtains and looked out at the lawn, where frost had lightly kissed the hedges overnight. The world hadn't changed, but something inside her had unclenched. Paige's apology hadn't made the past disappear, but it gave the future options. Eleanor knew herself well enough to know she didn't need Paige back in her life. What she needed was truth to be spoken, and it had been. That mattered more than inheritance. She dressed in a deep navy sweater, one her late husband used to call regal without trying, and walked into town for her standing coffee with her mentee, Shayla. Shayla was early, as always, a nursing textbook open and a pen between her teeth. "You okay?" she asked. Eleanor smiled, better than okay. She slid a plain white envelope across the table. Inside, a trust-supported grant for the next semester, fully funded. "From the woman who taught me the value of boundaries," Eleanor said softly. When she returned home that afternoon, she placed the navy sweater in a donation bag. Not because she wouldn't wear it again, but because she didn't need it to feel regal anymore. Before bed, Eleanor sat on the edge of her mattress and opened her journal. She wrote, "Sometimes the apology doesn't need a reply. Just a place to live." Then she blew out the candle on her nightstand and turned off the light. Paige started volunteering at the same library where Eleanor funded the program. Eleanor spotted her from across the library atrium, shelving books in the local history wing like she had always belonged there. Paige, the girl who once called her embarrassing, was now in canvas sneakers, hair in a low bun, sleeves rolled, alphabetizing biographies without a trace of the manicured vanity she once wore like armor. Eleanor stood behind a half-wall of periodicals, unnoticed. She didn't speak, just watched. The librarian leaned over and murmured, "She's showing up. We'll see if she stays." Eleanor nodded, then walked away. Some things weren't ready for conversation. Observation would suffice. That evening, Eleanor sat at her desk, pulled out the black folder labeled Reconsidered, and placed a sticky note inside. Observed, not decided. Then she opened a fresh page in her legal binder and outlined something new, a quarterly review system for grant candidates. Name, Paige Saunders. Status, provisional applicant. Requirement, monthly volunteer hours, reflective statement, third-party confirmation. Condition, no entitlement assumed, no legacy guaranteed. This wasn't punishment, it was a system, clean, fair, and born from experience. She typed a new clause into the trust document, love offered, legacy reviewed. The next day, she met with Shayla, her mentee, at the cafe off Main Street. The girl looked tired, textbook cracked open beside a barely touched coffee. "Finals," Shayla muttered. "I'm losing track of days." Eleanor smiled. She reached into her leather satchel and pulled out a plain envelope. Inside, a trust-backed grant for tuition and housing through the end of Shayla's program. "Yours," she said, placing it gently in Shayla's hand. Fully. The woman blinked, then burst into quiet tears. Her hands shook as she held the envelope. "Why me?" she asked. Eleanor didn't blink. "Because you never asked for anything you didn't try to earn." Later that week, Eleanor walked the perimeter of the library garden, her cane tapping lightly over stone pavers. She could hear the shuffle of reshelved hardcovers through an open window. She didn't look, just listened. She passed a bulletin board by the staff door, on it a sign-up sheet for weekend reading hours. Paige's name was written in small, neat cursive. 3 Saturdays in a row. Eleanor let her fingers trail the edge of the board, still not ready to speak, but almost. That night, Eleanor lit a candle, poured herself a half glass of Merlot, and opened her laptop. She updated her spreadsheet, shifting Paige's name from removed to provisional. Not forgiveness, not restoration, just review. The flicker of the flame caught a small glint of light on the mantel. Her photo, holding the scholarship letter from Section 12, stood next to a new frame. Inside, a black and white photo of her mother, standing in front of a boarding house with a violin in one hand and no safety net in the other. Eleanor whispered to the air, "We're still building what you never got." A week later, an email alert pinged. New notification. You've received a donation to the Reclaimed Voices Fund. Name, anonymous. Amount, $75. Message, thank you for seeing what needed to change. No signature. But Eleanor recognized the phrasing. It echoed Paige's last letter. She stared at it for a long moment, then folded her hands in her lap and breathed, long, slow, through her nose. A first gesture. Quiet. Voluntary. And unseen by anyone but her. That made it real. Eleanor placed the letter from Paige, still neatly folded, in the folder marked Reconsidered. Then she stood, walked to the entryway, and picked up her coat. She didn't need to read the letter again. She had heard the apology, not as a plea, but as an echo. And today she had somewhere else to visit, one final page to close on her own terms. The drive to the stadium was short, but she let it stretch. She kept the windows cracked, her fingers tapping a soft rhythm on the steering wheel. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the road and the thoughts she no longer feared. When she pulled into the lot, the wind pushed gently against her car, like a nudge rather than resistance. The sky overhead was clear but cool, that late spring sharpness that reminded you where you'd been and where you were now. Eleanor stepped out in soft-soled flats. Not once did she look behind her. The steps came into view, concrete slabs, uneven in places, unchanged since that day. The place where everyone gasped and no one rushed, where her body hit the ground and her value fell with it, at least in the eyes of those she once gave everything to. But now, there was no ache in her ankle, no audience to disappoint, just Eleanor and the truth she had stood on since. She climbed slowly, not from weakness, but to feel every inch of the rise. At the 4th step, the one she remembered best, she knelt, a single white tulip in hand. She set it down gently and whispered, "This is where I stopped hiding." Back on her feet, she opened her phone, logged in to the Reclaimed Voices Fund dashboard. 35 recipients. Next round, June 15th. One application flagged with a yellow star, a former domestic caregiver, now 62, requesting support to pursue community college. The kind of woman Eleanor used to teach piano to for free on Saturday mornings, the kind who said thank you before asking for anything. She smiled, pressed approve. The digital check released with a whoosh. She added a message, "You don't owe me a story, only your voice." In her Notes app, she tapped open a final entry. Title, "The Day I Stood Back Up." She read the first line out loud. "I thought I fell alone, but I landed on truth." Then, with the stadium quiet around her, she hit publish on the Foundation site. The essay went live under Founders Reflections. A ping followed, then another. New comment, Nurse Mom 74. "This made me cry in the best way." New comment, Legacy Strong. Standing ovation wherever you are. Eleanor tucked her phone back into her coat. She didn't need more applause. She'd had enough noise. Back home, she boiled water for tea, ginger and mint, and leaned against the counter, looking at the photo on her fridge, the one from her speech at the retreat. She was holding the scholarship letter like a certificate of survival. The graduation photo had long been taken down, replaced by moments earned, not gifted. She placed her tea on the desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out her last unfiled document, her own framed bank statement. Balance. Peace owner. Eleanor R. Collins. She hung it beside the window, a mirror that spoke in numbers, not noise. That night, Eleanor sat by the window, a gentle breeze moving the curtain like breath. She thought of the word legacy, how it once meant obligation. Now it meant choice. She didn't wait for Paige to call. She didn't need a thank you. She didn't need a retraction. She had her voice, her footing, and her folder of quiet wins. She placed her journal on the nightstand. The cover simply read, "After the fall."